Well, welcome everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. At this moment, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is video and voice recorded and live streamed from the hdsb.ca website. I'd also like to ask that you turn any devices to silent mode.
So good evening. As we begin every board meeting with land acknowledgement, I will like to read that out tonight. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Okay. I'd like to move to the approval of the agenda, and I'll ask if there are any changes, and then I'd like a motion to approve.
Could I just add one addition, which is a committee report, which the IB integration at Central. We can provide a report.
Okay. Did you get that wrong? Yes, under community, 4.4. Yeah. She's going to give a report. Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda with that addition. Margot, seconded by James. Thank you. The next, all in favor? Okay, thank you. I'd like the approval of the October 15th minutes, and I call for a move for a motion to approve the minutes. Somebody, thank you. Second by Dan. All in favor? Thank you. I'd now like to ask the Associate Director, David Borg, to introduce the next topic and speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for providing some time for us on the agenda. This next little segment, we have some guests here. They're going to talk to you folks about our multi-year plan, and I just wanted to really be here to say thank you for giving us some time, just to set the context a little bit. Our board has a strategic plan, a multi-year plan. It's a 4-year plan, and we're just finishing the 2016 to 2020 plan this spring. And so we're in the development stage for our next multi-year plan, which will start in 2020 to 24. We will spend a fair bit of time this year developing that plan, and it takes a fair bit of time because we want to do lots of consultation. If you're a parent in our board, or if you've been on our board website, you may have seen the news release or received an email about the process. And that consultation piece involves some online surveys for staff, students, and parents and community members, as well as some focus groups. And so we thought certainly SEAC would be one important group for us to get some voice from. And so that's why we're here this evening. You folks represent a very important population of our kids with special education needs. And so this will be one of 6 smaller group sessions, and then we'll have a couple of larger community sessions as well. So that, just want to set that context because we really do value the voice of the folks around this table. So we have a couple of guests here. I'm going to let them sort of introduce and talk about the process, but this is Josh and Hannah from Maximum City. Maximum City is a consultant that we did a request for a proposal, and they were the successful group, and they've been working with us in terms of designing the surveys that have gone out to the public, and also in this process around gathering feedback. So they're helping us to ensure we get lots of voice from all different stakeholders. So I'll turn it over to you, Josh.
Thank you so much. I want to reiterate what David said, and thank you for sharing your meeting with us this evening. Our job essentially is to ask you some good questions and then to listen, because you have some information that will strengthen the next multi-year plan. And we're here tonight to follow a very simple process where we tell you what the multi-year plan is. We ask you some questions, we get you to write down some ideas, and then we go back and we feed that into the funnel of the MYP development process. So I just have a few slides to go through before we start the discussion to sort of ground your thinking in the current MYP and what it entails. And this is the agenda that we have for the next hour or so. So we're going to introduce what the current multi-year plan is and what the engagement process is. We're going to have a facilitated discussion in small groups for the bulk of the hour, and then we'll share some key takeaways in the last 10 or 15 minutes. And really the purpose is to gather information from this group to help guide the development of the next multi-year plan, to discuss how the current values and goals can be strengthened or updated. So those 6 guiding values are up on that banner to the right of me at the front of the room, and the vision statement is on the left. We'll talk in a little bit more detail about that soon. And we also want to understand how the HDSB can support students with special learning needs through the next NYP. And that's the information that you have that we would like you to share with us so we can feed it back to the board. And then just so we understand who's in the room, we know that these are the groups that are represented, and we know that SEAC helps the HDSB protect the rights of students with special learning needs, and that under the Education Act, every student is entitled to programming which best meets their needs. The multi-year plan is, another term for it is the strategic plan. You may have heard that before. School boards often call them multi-year plans. And it's essentially the roadmap that informs the board's decisions, the allocation of resources while guiding collective actions for ongoing improvement over the next 4 years. It's sort of like a roadmap for the board to inform decisions and make sure that across students, staff, and system, that everyone is working towards ongoing improvement, and that the board's efforts support all students across the system as well. I'm just going to go back to this sort of graphic at the bottom here. This sort of summarizes what the process is around the development. So we're at step 1 at the bottom. We're doing the stakeholder engagement process right now. Well, then it then feeds into a vision. The current vision is up on the left in that banner. The values will be either strengthened or updated on the right. The goals speak to what some of the objectives are that feed into the values and the vision. And then the strategy would be how the board can support students, families, parents to achieve the goals that have been established in the MYP. And ultimately, that leads to the implementation. And then this is the current MYP. We will share some hard copies of it for you to look through during the discussion. But I think it's worth saying the vision statement out loud so you hear it. Every student will explore and enhance their potential, passion, and strengths as contributing global citizens. So one of the questions right off the bat is, does that resonate with you? Are there elements that need to be strengthened or updated? Would that speak to your children, to your stakeholders, to your membership, to your clients, et cetera? The values, those are the 6 guiding values that are currently in the MYP. Do these need to be strengthened or updated? That's another important question for this evening. The themes that the goals work through are engagement and achievement, stewardship and resources, equity and well-being, And the areas of focus for goals, again, are student, staff, and system. Any questions about the current MYP from what I've just said before we move into the next part of the discussion? Okay, that's good. So these are the questions that we've crafted for this evening, and there's sort of two parts to it. There's a front and a back, and we're going to hand these to you momentarily, but I'd like to walk through the questions first and then answer any questions that you might have about the questions themselves. The first side is sort of a brainstorm and sort of get some ideas down from your particular perspective. And then the back of the form is more solution oriented. So for example, the first question is, what is working well with how the HDSB is supporting students with special learning needs and what can be improved? So kind of a bit of a SWOT analysis. The second question came from another engagement process that we did with a similar group. We think it's an important question. What does an inclusive and accessible learning environment look like? So we'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And then finally, how can the values and goals of the current MYP be updated or strengthened to better support students with special learning needs? And once we have that discussion, we'll maybe take a break and share and then go to the back, which is, again, more strategy solution oriented. What are some of the ways the HDSP can support students with special learning needs too? And we've suggested choosing two of these topics, but I don't think we're sort of married to that. You could choose one, you could choose three. You could add something that's not on there that we haven't thought of, and then just provide some ideas in those two sort of spaces for us to take back into the process. So is that clear enough for everyone? Do we have any questions about the process or the questions that we're about to ask? No? Okay, great. That's good, because the next step will be to get to work, and what Hannah's going to circulate and give you the working sheets, and we have hard copies of the MYPs, and we'll circulate around the room and make sure that we're guiding you through the process as clearly as possible as well.
Okay, I'm just calling the meeting back to order. Our next topic is the survey for potential SEAC topics, and I'm handing it over to the next speaker, which is Joanna.
Okay, so if you recall, during the course of our year together, we've been collecting some topics for discussion at our subsequent meetings. And we thought that we best conduct a quick survey to see what topics people are most interested in and in terms of priorities, so that we can look to see how that ties in with current initiatives at the school board, so that we can ask staff for presentations if that's required, or simply tackle topics that we are interested in. And so I believe majority of you have responded, so thank you for that. And if you did not have a chance, then I think we can allow that tonight. You can complete your survey, and we will look at the final results tomorrow, but I don't anticipate things changing too much. So looking at some of the priorities, what has been identified when we look at kind of the top maybe 5 is the early intervention tools for, sorry. No, I think that's okay, yeah. Okay. Just looking to see what the formal name is. Early intervention tools for students with, at-risk students. Assistive technology. Unidentified students with IEPs. We do know through our special education review that we have a very large number of students that do not have a formal identification but do have an IEP. And looking at the Nelson Bateman integration, as well as the educational assistance support. So those were kind of the top rated priorities. And in the second kind of tier of topics, certainly bullying, racism and violence played a key role. Health and safety, overall communications to parents, and I believe there was also mental health updates. So, Mark, I don't know how you'd like to proceed with that.
Some of these I've already been talking with staff, and we have presentations either developed or in process, so we're able to come forward with these fairly soon. Some other things we debated about putting on this list or not, and decided not to, because we decided you really don't have a choice to whether you want to talk about the special education plan or not. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about the budget when that comes forward, in the late winter, spring. So those are going to be slotted into our time in the coming months. And then other things, because I thought if you put budget last, even though or gets ranked low, we still have to do it. So we didn't bother putting those on. So those things will get put on there. And then things come up, like tonight, when this request came forward as part of the multi-year plan process, we thought we needed to do this because the next meeting will be too late, or at least quite a bit further in that process, and they wanted to get, give SEAC an opportunity for input. So those kinds of things will happen through the year, and so we will bring these other items that but these topics in and fit them in with these other things that we need to do in the coming months. So it's not so much to say that we will absolutely do the number one thing first, but let's say those top 4, 5, 6, whichever, we'll try to make sure we get in this year for sure, since people prioritize them so high. And,
okay, I just have a quick question. So with this, if you pick something for number 1, it will have changed what you picked for number 2. So did those results only look at the specific number? Like, so if your number 1 choice was not what everybody else's number 1 choice was, you might have put it for number 2, but then it would have been disregarded, right? Do you see what I mean? So really what I look at is when you look at the results for your first choice, I would think that might, I don't know. Do you understand what I mean?
So the number,
So
so choice
if-
number one,
Okay, so say I put overall communication to parents for number one.
right?
That could not be my number two topic,
Correct.
right? So then if nobody picked that for number two, it's been lost.
Right.
So I'm just not sure. So if never mind. Does anybody understand what I mean? Because you're only picking the first, second, and the choices that everybody picked. So the ones that you had for number one, if nobody else liked that, it's then lost.
Sorry.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes, but I don't think that's the way the Google, how it works. I think that what happens is that each topic gets given a point score. So if you choose, and those overall, so if you chose communication for parents first, that gets a 10-point value. I chose it 9th, then it only gets a 1-point value. But overall, the ones that got the highest value are the biggest part of that pie chart. I think that's how it works.
So was it the most scientific way to gather your input? No. Did we gather your input? Did it help us? If you really feel
I know what
differently about the prioritizing
No,
of
no.
the
So what
topics,
I'm asking is
please
how.
speak up, right? These are your meetings collectively, not one person's, not the chairs or anyone else's. So if you feel that this is not representative of what you as a group want, please say so.
Well, so what my question is then is, are we then, for the topics, looking at in this bullying, and then second, looking at unidentified students with an IEP, or second, looking at EA support? Because if you look at this, EA support isn't on choice 2 at all, but it's 30.8% in choice 1. So how do we pick the topics we're going to look at?
Sorry, can I just ask a quick, I guess it's the same thing. Is there a summary chart where you take all those numbers and put it all into the last? Was there a number? I know there were these charts, but was there one where it added up all the
No.
all the
this is-
totals?
It's just the choice 1, choice
Yeah.
2, choice 3. That's what she's saying.
Yeah, I just wondered if there, as you say, there was a Google thing where it all came up with it and you came up with an answer.
Oh, you know, where the questions we could email the responses, and then it just gives us.
Like if you'd got, number 1 gets 30,
So
number 2
unfortunately,
gets...
the way this was structured is that you will see who selected what topic as their number 1. So for number 1 agenda, so priority number 1, it looks like it's early intervention tools and strategies to identify at-risk students, followed closely by EA support. For second priority, it would be unidentified students with IEP, and then there's a split, overall communications and bullying. Priority number 3, so I think we need to, understanding that what are the key areas early on in the top 3 to 5 priorities, we need to pick those topics and decide what order we're going to address them. And if something didn't come as high as a priority, but we feel as a group we really do want to look at it, then that can certainly bump things.
Maybe I'll add, I don't think we're going to get to all 11 of these this year, right? Let's be honest. We know how many things come up and how much time we have. And if let's say we get to 5 or 6 of these this year, by the end of June, some of those other ones may be still important to us, but the other things rise, right? That sort of been the nature as I've observed, how we function, what our interests are, they tend to evolve and roll with what's going on. So we may continue with those, or we may brainstorm other ideas that we want to talk about. So once again, it's, there's lots of flexibility here.
Well, if I could just, continue. So just by looking at the priority number 1, 2, and 3, what we're getting here is that people are keen in understanding early intervention tools and strategies to identify at-risk students, EA support, unidentified students with IEP, and then we're looking at bullying, overall communications with parents. So those would be our, I would say, 5 key areas.
Can I open it up? As a group, do you guys agree with our understanding of what this means? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. Is there any discussion, or have we just had the discussion? Then I'll move to topic 4.
Sorry, Melissa, are you trying to log in?
I just want to follow up, and sorry I was late this evening, so when we approved the minutes from the last meeting, I missed that. Just some questions. We had very, very briefly addressed the issues of the outdoor classroom at both Bateman and Nelson. In the interim from the last meeting until till today, I've met with a group of parents at Nelson. Lisa was there and Jason was there as well. If you recall, Jason, our chair from last year. And a huge group of parents were there. I saw for myself, I took some photographs myself. There are definitely some major concerns that need to be addressed with the outdoor classroom at Nelson. And I'm thinking that we really need to get it at some point on the agenda. There's lots of things to discuss. I know we probably don't have time this evening, but it's a... and the thing that concerns me the most, I think, being part of SEAC, is that these parents are really upset, and their next step, without getting any sort of voice or representation, is to go to the media. And I think clearly to just discuss some things here and to raise their concerns here, I think would be a lot more productive than having anybody else get involved. But I think they really want to have their voices heard. And as a parent of a child with some accessibility needs, I definitely agree with their assessments.
For sure. I'm glad. I appreciate you, participating in that meeting and raising that here. So, is that? So I guess I'm wondering how and when. What are your suggestions there?
Well, they want to they want to actually present their issues to this committee, and they want I think more than anything, they want someone to hear their voice and to hear what concerns they have, and they want to hear. I think the whole outdoor classroom, certainly at Nelson, was presented to everybody. It was advertised on Twitter. It went out like it was all a done deal. It's clearly not done. The library has not yet been converted to the new CPP classroom. There's no way from that current library into this outdoor space as of yet. There's a lot of issues with their proximity to the road. It's literally maybe 20 meters from New Street, which is a very, very busy road. So there's massive concerns in terms of safety of these students. But there's also some concerns as well. A lot of money was spent building these benches. So they're log benches. Number one, they don't fit the width of a bum. So we had I would say, a 16, 17-year-old boy there with us, and he could not sit without his whole rear end on the actual stump. That's a major concern for kids with low muscle tone that have mobility issues. In addition, there's bark, so the back of their legs is now touching bark. Some parents raised concerns about the sensory issues that would involve with there. Then we talked about, and to be honest, the last thing I'll say is, anyway, I think they would like an opportunity to come and to raise their concerns and to just find out some questions. I think their major question was there any OTPT that was involved in the planning of these outdoor classrooms specific to those CPP community? And if not, could some modifications still be made? I mean, they haven't even reverted the library yet into the classroom. So there is time, but they want to make sure that that's not how it's going to be, because I don't think anybody felt that that was a safe place for their child.
So, am I hearing you say sooner the better? And in terms of the how, would it be beneficial to have a bit of a presentation to help understand what went into the design, who had voice, what that input looked like?
Yes.
And then what are the, because it's not done, you're right, in lots of ways it's not finished.
And I think some of them, again, this third hand, received information like, no, this is done, all done, promoted it on Twitter and whatever. And I think that's what they want to hear, is that as the classroom is built and facilitated, it clearly looks like there's going to be a new door built, but nobody has said anything to them. So right now it looks like they come off of a mossy ramp into the grass, that they then have to take the grass into this sort of area. So to say that it's a finished product, they're quite disappointed. So I think, yes, they would like to hear the background and that from you. And I think maybe then have a chance for them to raise some concerns in the hope that by next September, when the class opens, that these issues can be met.
Sure.
But I think many are really upset about the location of the, right in the front of the school. Not only is it close to the road, and there's no talk of any kind of fencing.
Sure.
That's a concern that I don't know it can be moved. But standing there the other day, my major thought was they're right outside of all of the academic and applied level classrooms looking down on their environment. And I think,
so let's, so we can certainly do a presentation so that there's an understanding of how we landed where we did.
Great.
And then opportunity for input.
Perfect.
And then next steps.
Great. I think they'd really appreciate that.
So if it's okay with the committee, we could do that next month. If this is a source of concern, of anxiety, if those are the right terms.
And I think it's heading off a bigger
parents. Yeah, I would
headache.
rather address that sooner than later, if that's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
I'd rather address it sooner than later. So with the permission of the committee, we'll bring that. That'll be a fairly fulsome item for next week, kind of like the multi-year plan was next month. It'll be a pretty fulsome item for next month.
Great.
So we can build that in. I've already seen there's a fairly fulsome amount of information about all that.
Great.
But at the same time, we want to hear the concerns and hear people's ideas so we can make it as best possible.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So
sorry, just before we move on, while I understand the importance, I think that we need to get the okay from the whole committee. So I just want to ask, does anybody on the committee mind if we put this on the agenda for the next meeting? Do we have consensus to do that? Thank you. Learning just, Dan?
Okay. My question is that we've just finished discussing our survey and our list of priorities, and now we've taken another subject and plugged it in up to the top. Does it need to be the entire meeting? Can we not handle two subjects?
I don't think it it certainly doesn't need to be the entire meeting. I think having sort of a 5-minute position addressed by the board and allowing sort of 5 minutes for them to raise the most serious of questions. I would think maximum 15 minutes to discuss this issue. And to be fair, I mean, there's certain other exceptionalities, like this is an accessibility issue we never talk about the CPP program. And in the 2 years that I've been here, we've yet to devote an hour and a half to talking about the CPP program. And I think it's fair that these kids, especially the ones that are moving from one location that was, millions of dollars put into that building in 2003 or 4 to build that great program, that CPP program, and now with the amalgamation of the 2 schools are having to move. And for some of those kids, it's going to be a huge adjustment.
Yeah, I think to do the conversation justice, it's going to be more than 10 or 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So could we fit another topic in next month? We could probably do that. We'll look at the topics as they've been prioritized and how long they might take, and maybe put in a shorter one with this so we can try and combine 2 together. So we'll look at that. So it doesn't have to take the whole, all of the 2.0 in our agenda, but I think to do it justice, I wouldn't want to see us, allocate 10 or 15 minutes, and then it turns into 40, and then we're backed up the whole night. So I think I'd rather make sure we like to slot in enough time.
Well, I don't know that it necessarily has to be in this forum as well. I think they want their concerns heard, and I think they feel like using, certain members of our committee is the best way to get their voices heard with somebody like yourself that has the power to make changes and to make it. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this committee format. It can be at a special meeting. I can bring their concerns through me to you. We can address that, but I do think they have some concerns that.
So that's a fair suggestion. It doesn't have to be here at SEAC. We could, we can facilitate a separate opportunity for input. Mm-hmm.
I think when we did the go around. That's what I also thought, and I think that a good solution would be to pair it with another item, mm-hmm. and move forward with that. Would that be acceptable, Dan? Okay. Thank you. So that is 3.0. So we're moving to 4.0, communication to SEAC. Superintendent's report.
So my first one was just explaining what we were doing with the multi-year plan tonight. The other 2 items are really a heads up for SEAC around 2 fairly significant pieces of work that are going on. So the after-school skills development program was announced by the ministry last year as part of the Ministry of Ed sort of working with the Ministry of Children and Community Social Services around changes to the Ontario Autism Program. So even though those changes have been put on hold or delayed, if that's the right term, with the other ministry, the Ministry of Ed has continued with this after-school skills development program for students with autism. So this is a 3-year program that's all boards are to offer. There was a pilot run, I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago, in which a small number of boards participated, and they've continued to participate since that time and receive ministry funding for. I've talked to, I think, 4 or 5 boards that participated in that pilot, all of them doing some really great opportunities for families, for students after school. Each one of them very different. So they've taken different approaches because there hasn't been a sort of a regimented profile of student with autism or age level or program focus. It's been quite broad, which I think has worked well in lots of ways because then they've really made it fit their population and their communities. So it's been very interesting to hear what those have looked like. The ministry is hosting a webinar for all boards November, I want to say 18th. I might have the wrong date, but it's later this month, which we've been waiting for, where they're going to lay out more of the parameters for what these programs need to look like. So we're going to hear that webinar. We have some print information guidelines from the ministry, and then we'll start to move forward with planning. And so when we engage in that, part of what we'll do is bring a bit of that plan, not bit of it, we'll bring our planning off to see where we are in that process for your input, because we certainly want to hear that. And so you can hear what we're doing, but also have some, like I said, some input, and then we'll let you know more of where we're at with the timeline. So we're excited about this. This looks like a great opportunity. And, you know, the ministry has done this with funding, which they don't always do. Sometimes they tell boards they have to do things and then don't give us any money. We're happy that there's money that comes with this. So that'll be in the works. And the other item here is the service animal admin procedure. And this had a fair bit of press with when we had the new government elected. There was, you know, I guess a certain amount of talk and activity in the media around sort of allowing all service animals in, and that's, I guess, been tempered a bit, saying that all boards need to develop an admin procedure. We've had a draft protocol in place for a few years now, which we didn't finalize because we knew this was coming. So we've been waiting for this from the ministry. And as I mentioned here, we also, the boards, the public boards anyway, I'm not sure about the Catholic, but I know the public boards all got together and approached legal counsel to say, can you help us with this? Because we want to make sure that we're in a good spot as we develop this to be able to support those students. And I'm sure you can appreciate that there's potential when you bring a service animal into a school to have competing rights, where we have students with allergies or with fear of animals or those kinds of things. So we need to do this right, that we can, you know, move the right path around making those decisions and making sure that the animal coming in truly does support the needs of that student, and it's not just about a preference. So that's all part of what's guiding the development of this admin procedure. So that is coming as well. I believe it's by the end of January, is it, Sean, that we have to have, by the end of January, that all boards have to have this admin procedure in place. So as we develop that, we'll be bringing it here for CAC's input as well. And I welcome any questions.
Moving on to association. Oh, it was a question.
Do you have a question? Yes.
We're still learning how to use the restaurant. So.
Okay, thank you. No, my question is, I mean, there's some very obvious reasons for the need for service animals in the school, but high anxiety isn't necessarily one of the most obvious, and I'm just wondering if that has been taken into consideration, that the role that a service animal can play when there is very high anxiety.
So certainly there are a number of needs that a service animal can fill. And so I'll have to go back and look at the information provided by the ministry. And like I said, we just got this support from legal counsel as well of how we're blending all that together. But certainly in terms of those needs, we want all students to be able to participate as well as best possible in school. So, sometimes we can do that best by having a service animal accompany the student into the school. What we don't want to have happen is that there's any, not the words confusion, but there's we sort of negate or forget about the other supports that are available to students. So some of the question will be, what is it that service animal can do that staff can't? So there are some things that, because I've had requests for service animals every year coming into our schools, right? And we make those decisions all the time. And so that's one of the questions we ask is, we're not looking to disadvantage students at all, but it's also not a sort of a free-for-all. Any animal can come in whenever there's a request, right? So one of the questions that we ask to be a bit discerning is, what is it that service animal can do that we can't do with staff? So when you're at a question about anxiety, what are all the ways that we can support that student's needs? And because in some cases, a service animal can do that better than we can. So we'll be looking at that. But we need to be a bit discerning in terms of deciding, is that service animal really needed? Does that make sense? So more of that will become clear. Like I said, we've been working on this. We've got some draft material in process. So we will bring that. And when I, this I think goes back to our talk about topics here tonight, because when we do bring this to SEAC, which will be in the next month or two, I anticipate this will take a chunk of time, right? So I know it wasn't on our list of topics, but I really want you to have the opportunity to give input. So it'll probably take, a good portion of an agenda when we bring it.
Okay, association reports.
So on behalf of the Learning Disabilities Association, we've just finished LD Awareness Month. That was last month. So we had a number of successful events. And we are in the final stages of finishing planning for our March conference, which will be on supporting children with learning disabilities and ADHD. And so tickets will be going available in the next few weeks. So I will give you more update as that comes along.
Any others? No? Trustee reports?
All right, the Halton District School Board is pleased to announce that Jewel Amoa has been appointed to the role of Human Rights and Equity Advisor. Jewel Amoa will join the HCSB Senior Leadership Team as a Human Rights and Equity Advisor in January of next year. As a human rights lawyer, activist, and academic with more than 2 decades of experience in human rights and equality rights advocacy and policy development in Canada and abroad, Dr. Amoa brings critical expertise in equity in educational environments and an analytical perspective on social justice. The creation of this position has been made possible with funding from the Ontario government to school boards to employ a senior leader to address human rights concerns and proactively address equity and human rights issues. Dr. Amoa will be a member of the senior administrative team when she begins in January of 2020, and she's a member of the Law Society of Ontario.
Thank you. Committee reports. The first is the Parent Involvement Committee. Is there, no? Okay, Accessibility and Coordinating Committee, that's you.
Okay. So I'm pleased to announce that Lou has offered to take on the role of SEAC rep on the Accessibility Committee. So she and I attended a meeting last week, and there is an annual plan, operational plan, that's under review, and more input from SEAC will be sought on a number of perspectives of that.
Maybe I could add, we did get a request from the staff that are on that committee if they could bring that report actually next month. So I don't think they need too much time, maybe 15 minutes or so, but they want to share the sort of basic status of our accessibility in our schools, because that keeps getting updated every year, and bring that to share with SEAC next month. So they've already asked if they could be on the agenda.
Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Steering Committee. Diane?
That committee has their first meeting this Thursday, so I will have more to say next month.
And yes.
All right, we had our first integration meeting 2 weeks ago under sort of the supervision of Superintendents Robbie Tott and Terry Blackwell. I think it was very successful. We had 6 students, 3 from Bateman and 3 from Nelson, from the different populations of the school, and they really led the meeting. Really strong student voice, telling the staff, teachers, and parents on the committee what they felt was the right way to go forward. So it was really, really great meeting. That was it.
We also have another agenda item, which is the central. Well,
yeah, so this is the integration of the IB program from Robert Bateman to Central. And again, we met a couple of weeks ago, Terry Blackwell. And again, it was a wonderful meeting. We had, I'm going to say, about 8 students from grades 9 to 12. A good mix of the 2 schools, and really strong energy about the opportunities that could arise with the bringing together of the program at Central. There's a lot already taking place. Staff have already been brought over, principals are already liaising. There are a lot of transition days planned, and a lot of events that are already being planned to take place, sports teams, to try and build that cohesiveness among the IB students. One area, a couple of areas that may be relevant to this group is, going forward, we'll be looking at mental health supports for transitioning students, and also that accessibility is being improved at Central, so that it's no longer Harry Potter world, it's going to have a lift.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you haven't been to Central High School, it's a bit of a, it's how old, 100 and something years, so it is a bit of a maze. So accessibility is being improved.
Okay. We've been discussing the next agenda, so is there anything else to add towards?
So we know it's going to be the outdoor classroom at Nelson. We're going to, yeah. And we're going to talk about the accessibility, and then we'll see if there's another item that we can fit that's a bit shorter. We'll see. We know that people have.
We'll take them from the list and we'll just look for one.
Yeah.
Okay. I will. Is there anything else that anybody wishes to discuss? If not, then I call the 13th, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Obviously.